Hey everyone, and welcome back to another hot news video from our station. We will talk about American celebrities who died today and in the last few days, as well as famous people from other countries in this movie. Please show your love and support by giving this movie a like before we go on. It means a lot to us. Thanks, let's get started. 1. Imani Diaz-Smith, a child actress who used to work on Broadway and acted in The Lion King, has died. She was 26 years old. On Sunday, December 21st, Smith was found at a home in Edison, New Jersey, with stab wounds. Prosecutors say she was declared dead at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in New Brunswick after being taken there. 36-year-old Jordan D. Jackson Small, her boyfriend, was caught and charged with murder in the first degree, endangering the safety of a child in the second degree, and having weapons. After she died, she left behind a 3-year-old son, her parents, 2 younger brothers, and a large group of people who loved her very much. Helper, Smith's aunt, wrote in a GoFundMe page set up for the family. The money raised will pay for Smith's funeral, therapy for her family to deal with their grief, court fees, and care for her son and dog. Imani was going to live a long time. She was full of life, loved others, and was very skilled. She is a true triple threat on stage, but her most famous part was as young Nala in Disney's The Lion King on Broadway. On the GoFundMe page, it says that Smith was in The Lion King from 2011 to 2012. Monique Smith is Smith's mother. She is a hairstylist for Broadway shows and movies, such as The Housemaid this year and Smile in 2022. More than $46,000 has been donated to the GoFundMe by 609 people. The goal is $55,000 to help the family focus on healing and mourning. Mick Abrahams, the first guitarist for Jethro Tull and the founder of Blodwyn Pig, has died at the age of 82. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull revealed the news on the band's website on Sunday, December 21st. We were very sad to hear that Mick Abrahams, a founder member of Jethro Tull, had died. Anderson, 78, wrote that Mick had been sick for 15 years and couldn't act because of it. Anderson said that Abrahams was very important to the early formation of Tull and that he was a strong singer and an experienced, powerful, and rhythmic guitarist. Mick owned the stage at the Marquee Club when he sang Cat Squirrel, and every show we did together, Anderson wrote. Born in April 1943 in Luton, England, Abrahams co-founded Jethro Tull in 1967 and played on their 1968 debut album, This Was. However, he left in December 1968 over creative differences about musical direction. Soon after, he formed the blues rock group, Blodwyn Pig. The band released 2 albums that cracked the top 10 on the UK albums chart. Abrahams later launched a solo career, releasing several albums throughout the years. His music career faced challenges due to health problems. I had 2 heart attacks and a stroke almost at the same time in November 2009, he told Prog in 2018. I can join in a bit on guitar with others, but nowhere near the level I was once able to achieve. Pat Finn has died at age 60 after battling cancer. A representative confirms the actor died on Monday, December 22nd. He was best known for his role on the ABC sitcom The Middle, playing Bill Norwood from 2011 to 2018. He also appeared in hit 90s sitcoms, including Seinfeld and Friends, playing Monica's boyfriend, Dr. Roger. Pat was the kindest, most joyful person in any room, and was surrounded by his incredibly close and loving family and friends. We will all miss his big smile and even bigger heart, his representative said. Finn died at his home in Los Angeles surrounded by family. He is survived by his wife of 35 years, Donna, and their 3 children, Cassidy, Caitlin and Ryan. According to his rep, Finn battled bladder cancer in 2022 and went into remission. But the cancer returned and metastasized. He was a warrior in every sense of the word. His daughter Cassidy shared a tribute on Instagram. Dad, you were a role model and an inspiration to everyone you met. No word could ever do you justice. You are Pat Finn. My life is forever changed because of him. He taught me to be funny, positive, humble, to love, and to surround myself with the best people. But most importantly, you taught me kindness. I love you, 10 Dad. Finn attended Marquette University in 1987, where he played rugby with Saturday Night Live star Chris Farley. They became roommates after graduating and joined the iconic Second City comedy troupe. Acclaimed Soviet and Russian actress Vera Alentova has died at age 83. The Pushkin Drama Theater announced Thursday. Alentova rose to international fame for her starring role in the 1979 film, Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears, which won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. Her portrayal of Katerina Tikhonova made her one of the most recognizable actresses of her generation. Moscow news outlet, Maskey 1. Yaru reported that Alentova was taken away on a stretcher Thursday after feeling unwell during a farewell ceremony for fellow actor Anatoly Lobatsky. The cause of death was not mentioned. Born in 1942 in Kotlas in the Arkhangelsk region, Alentova grew up in a family of artists. She graduated from the Moscow Art Theater School in 1965 and became a leading figure on the Soviet stage and screen. She joined the Pushkin Drama Theater after graduating and spent more than 5 decades there, earning acclaim for performances in both classical and contemporary productions. Alentova appeared in more than 30 films and television series during her career and received numerous honors, including the USSR State Prize in 1981. She was named a People's Artist of Russia and received the Order of Friendship in 2001. She was married for 48 years to actor Vladimir Menshov, who died in 2021 at age 82. Alentova is survived by her daughter, actress and television presenter Yulia Menshova. Actor Uwe Kokosh, famous for playing Commissario Brunetti in the ARD crime series Donna Leon, has died at age 81. He died in Madrid on Monday, his agency confirmed, citing his wife. In 2003, Kokosh took over the role of Commissario Brunetti investigating in Venice. He played the detective until the end of the TV series in 2019. The ARD crime series, based on novels by U.S. author Donna Leon, featured Kokosh solving cases in the stunning Lagoon City. The crime series enjoyed huge popularity with German television audiences. 5.72 million viewers tuned in to the final Brunetti case, Donna Leon, still a Vassar, on Christmas Day 2019, despite competition from The Helene Fischer Show airing simultaneously on ZDF. In a 2019 interview about filming in Venice, Kokosh said, "It was fun. Others often said, 'Oh man in Venice,' but we didn't go there to relax. You could still discover the city and get into the story, that was the great pleasure." Kokosh succeeded Joachim Kroll, who previously played the role of Commissario Brunetti. The series ran for 16 years, making Kokosh one of Germany's most beloved television detectives. TikTok star at the gamer grandma, who had over 3 million followers across platforms, has died at age 78. Her grandson, Kulsons, announced that his grandmother Agnes died on Sunday, December 21, holding the hand of her daughter, Pauline. "She left this world the way she lived in it, surrounded by love," he wrote. The statement, shared on Tuesday, 23, recalled how Agnes' family watched her slowly lose her words, referring to her recent health decline. Coulson's first shared details about his grandmother's condition in October, explaining why she hadn't appeared in new videos. On Octodine 16, he noted that Agnes' chronic obstructive pulmonary disease had worsened significantly, and she had been taken to the hospital. 2 days later, Coulsons confirmed his grandmother suffered a major stroke and would undergo treatment and testing to address an anomaly in her lungs. In an Overna 6 update, he wrote, "Her mind and speech remain seriously impaired. Most sentences are either entirely illegible or simply don't make sense. Her bones are in agony and it's absolutely heartbreaking to witness." In his post announcing Agnes' death, Coulsons honored her legacy and impact on millions of social media fans. "Grandma showed that the internet doesn't only belong to the young. She showed that you can be in your 70s and still find new communities, new friendships, new ways to express yourself. She reminded people that our elders are not invisible." Michael Kirk Douglas entered the world on September 25, 1944 in New Brunswick, New Jersey, born into a family where Hollywood royalty already ran through his veins. His father, Kirk Douglas, was rapidly ascending to become one of the most powerful and respected actors in American cinema. While his mother, Diana Dill, was a British actress from Bermuda who had met Kirk during their time at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. From his very first breath, Michael was destined to navigate the complicated intersection of privilege, expectation, and the relentless scrutiny that comes with being the son of a legendary performer. Growing up in the Douglas household meant experiencing the glamorous side of Hollywood while simultaneously feeling the weight of an almost impossible legacy. Kirk Douglas was not just successful, he was a force of nature, an actor whose intensity on screen was matched only by his demanding presence at home. Michael's childhood was marked by the constant absence of his father, who was frequently away on film sets around the world, leaving young Michael to form his primary attachment with his mother.
This dynamic created a complex relationship between father and son that would take decades to fully resolve. A relationship characterized by love, admiration, resentment, and the desperate need for approval that Michael would later acknowledge shaped much of his early adult life. The marriage between Kirk and Diana was turbulent and ultimately unsustainable. When Michael was just 6 years old, his parents divorced, a split that fractured his world and introduced him to the painful reality that even Hollywood royalty couldn't maintain perfect families. Diana remarried, and Michael found himself navigating between two households, two families, and two very different worlds. His father remarried as well to Ann Bidens, a union that would last for decades and produce two more sons, giving Michael half-brothers who would grow up in a more stable household than he had experienced. Despite the divorce, or perhaps because of it, Michael remained deeply connected to both parents, though in vastly different ways. His mother provided stability, warmth, and a sense of normalcy that was the otherwise impossible in his fractured Hollywood existence. She encouraged his education and tried to shield him from the more toxic aspects of fame. His father, meanwhile, represented both aspiration and intimidation. Kirk Douglas was a man who had clawed his way up from poverty, a self-made icon who expected excellence and discipline from his children. Michael grew up watching his father command rooms, dominate film sets, and receive the adulation of millions, all while feeling like he could never quite measure up to that towering example. Education became Michael's refuge and his path toward establishing his own identity separate from his famous surname. He attended Eaglebrook School and later the Choate Preparatory School in Connecticut, elite institutions where he was surrounded by the children of America's wealthy and powerful. These years were formative, allowing him to develop friendships and interests beyond the shadow of Hollywood. He was a good student, though not exceptional, showing more interest in social activities and sports than in academic achievement. What he did develop during these years was a strong work ethic and a determination to prove himself on his own terms, not simply as Kirk Douglas's son. After graduating from Choate, Michael enrolled at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where he studied drama. This choice was significant. It represented both a continuation of the family legacy and an assertion of independence. He wasn't going to run from acting, but he also wasn't going to simply ride his father's coattails. At UCSB, Michael immersed himself in theatrical productions, learning the craft from the ground up, studying method acting, and developing the skills that would later define his career. He graduated in 1968 with a Bachelor of Arts in Drama, just as America was convulsing with social and political upheaval that would reshape the nation and its entertainment industry. The late 1960s were a time of tremendous change, and Michael Douglas came of age during this revolutionary period. The Vietnam War was raging. The civil rights movement was forcing America to confront its racial injustices. And young people across the country were questioning authority and traditional values. Michael, like many of his generation, was deeply affected by these currents. He was liberal, progressive, and sympathetic to the counterculture movements that his father's generation often viewed with suspicion and disdain. This generational divide added another layer of complexity to his relationship with Kirk, who represented old Hollywood conservatism, while Michael was drawn to the new wave of filmmaking that was emerging. Michael Douglas's entry into professional acting was anything but smooth, despite his famous lineage. In fact, his surname initially worked against him, with casting directors and producers skeptical about whether he possessed genuine talent or was simply another nepotism beneficiary trying to capitalize on his father's fame. His early roles were small, forgettable parts that did little to distinguish him from countless other aspiring actors flooding into Hollywood during the late 1960s and early 1970s. He appeared in television shows, took minor film roles, and struggled with the constant comparisons to his father, whose career was still blazing bright during this period. The breakthrough came in 1969. When Michael landed the role of Inspector Steve Keller in the television series, The Streets of San Francisco. Starring opposite the veteran actor, Karl Malden, Michael found the perfect vehicle to showcase his talents while learning from a consummate professional who became a mentor and father figure to him. The show ran for 5 seasons from 1972 to 1977 and became a massive hit, establishing Michael Douglas as a household name in his own right. Week after week, audiences welcomed him into their living rooms, and he developed the charisma, screen presence, and technical skills that would serve him throughout his career. The role was demanding, requiring long hours and intense commitment, but it gave Michael something invaluable: credibility as an actor who could carry a successful project. However, Michael's ambitions extended beyond acting. He had always been fascinated by the business side of filmmaking.
by the power that producers wielded in shaping projects and controlling narratives. While still working on the streets of San Francisco, he began developing his skills as a producer, reading scripts, meeting with writers, and learning about financing and distribution. This dual interest in performing and producing would become the defining characteristic of his career, setting him apart from actors who were content to simply take roles others offered them. His first major success as a producer came with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975, a project that his father Kirk had been trying to get made for years after performing in a stage adaptation. Kirk owned the rights to Ken Kesey's novel, but couldn't find financing for a film version. Michael took over the project, partnered with producer Saul Zaentz, brought in director Milos Forman, and cast Jack Nicholson in the lead role that Kirk had wanted for himself. This decision to cast someone other than his father was both professionally sound and personally painful, representing another complicated chapter in their relationship. The film became one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the decade, sweeping the Academy Awards by winning Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. At just 30 years old, Michael Douglas held an Oscar for Best Picture, establishing himself as a major player in Hollywood. The success of Cuckoo's Nest opened doors, but Michael's career as an actor took time to catch fire. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, he appeared in various films with mixed results. Coma in 1978 was a modest thriller success. The China Syndrome in 1979, where he also served as producer, was both critically acclaimed and commercially successful, earning multiple Oscar nominations and proving eerily prescient when the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident occurred just 12 days after the film's release. The timing was coincidental but devastating, lending the film's warnings about nuclear safety an urgent, terrifying credibility that made it a cultural phenomenon. But it was 1984's Romancing the Stone that truly established Michael Douglas as a leading man and box office draw. Playing Jack Colton, a charming adventurer opposite Kathleen Turner's romance novelist, Michael displayed a lighter touch, comedic timing, and romantic chemistry that audiences hadn't seen from him before. The film was a massive hit, grossing over $90 million and proving that Michael could carry an action-adventure romance hybrid. He followed it with the sequel, The Jewel of the Nile, in 1985, which, while not as critically beloved, was another commercial success that cemented his status as a bankable star. Then came 1987, the year that would define Michael Douglas's career and cultural impact for decades to come. Fatal Attraction, directed by Adrian Lyne, cast Michael as Dan Gallagher, a married man whose weekend affair with Alex Forrest, played brilliantly by Glenn Close, spirals into a nightmare of obsession and terror. The film touched a nerve in American culture, tapping into anxieties about infidelity, women's liberation, career women, and the breakdown of traditional family structures. It became a massive phenomenon, grossing over $300 million worldwide and generating endless discussions about morality, gender politics, and relationships. Michael's performance as the everyman who makes a catastrophic mistake was pitch perfect, making audiences simultaneously sympathize with and judge his character. That same year, Michael took on the role that would become his most iconic, Gordon Gekko in Oliver Stone's Wall Street. With slicked back hair, suspenders, and the now legendary line, "Greed, for lack of a better word, is good," Michael created a character who became the embodiment of 1980s excess in corporate rating culture. Gekko was charismatic, ruthless, brilliant, and morally bankrupt, a villain who many viewers perversely admired and wanted to emulate. The performance earned Michael the Academy Award for Best Actor, validating him as not just a star, but a serious, transformative performer capable of disappearing into complex characters. The Oscar win for Wall Street propelled Michael Douglas into the upper echelon of Hollywood stardom, a position he would occupy throughout the late 1980s and well into the 1990s. He had achieved what many actors spend entire careers pursuing: critical respect combined with massive commercial appeal. Studios wanted him, audiences loved him, and he had the power to greenlight projects and command enormous salaries. But more importantly, he had found his niche playing flawed, complicated men navigating moral ambiguity, characters who reflected the anxieties and contradictions of contemporary American masculinity. In 1989, Michael starred in The War of the Roses, a pitch-black comedy about a divorcing couple whose battle over their house escalates into mutual destruction. Reuniting with Kathleen Turner and director Danny DeVito, the film was both hilarious and disturbing, a savage satire of marriage materialism and pride. Michael's performance as Oliver Rose showed his range, moving from sympathetic husband to vengeful monster with believable progression. The film resonated with audiences going through the high divorce rates of the era, offering a cathartic exaggerated vision of their own domestic conflicts.
The following year brought Flatliners, a supernatural thriller where Michael played a medical student experimenting with near-death experiences. While not as commercially or critically successful as his previous films, it demonstrated his willingness to take risks on high-concept material and work with emerging directors like Joel Schumacher. He was also producing during this period, maintaining multiple projects in development and using his influence to champion films he believed in. But it was 1992's Basic Instinct that would generate the most controversy and commercial success of his career. Directed by Paul Verhoeven and written by Joe Eszterhas, the erotic thriller cast Michael as Detective Nick Curran, a troubled cop investigating a murder while becoming sexually involved with the prime suspect, Catherine Trammell, played by Sharon Stone in her career-defining role. The film was incendiary, featuring graphic sexuality, violence, and moral ambiguity that pushed boundaries even in the increasingly permissive Hollywood landscape. It sparked protests from LGBTQ groups who objected to its portrayal of bisexual characters as psychopathic killers, yet audiences flocked to theaters, making it one of the highest-grossing films of the year with over $350 million worldwide. Michael's performance walked a tightrope between vulnerability and machismo. Playing a man addicted to danger and self-destruction who may be getting manipulated by a woman far smarter and more calculating than he is. The film's famous interrogation scene, with Sharon Stone's leg-crossing moment, became one of cinema's most talked-about sequences. But it was Michael's portrayal of masculine unraveling that gave the film its psychological depth. He was willing to be unsexy, to show weakness, addiction, and desperation, in ways that male stars typically avoided. Falling Down arrived in 1993, offering Michael one of his most complex and controversial roles. As William Foster, a recently unemployed defense worker who snaps during a Los Angeles traffic jam and goes on a violent rampage across the city, Michael embodied white male rage and obsolescence in a changing America. The film was deliberately provocative, asking audiences to sympathize with a character committing increasingly violent acts while simultaneously critiquing the entitlement and racism driving his breakdown. Some critics accused the film of being irresponsible, potentially inspiring real-world violence, while others praised it as a searing social commentary. Michael's performance was fearless, refusing to make Foster simply sympathetic or purely villainous, instead presenting him as a tragic figure whose legitimate grievances had curdled into dangerous delusion. He followed this with Disclosure in 1994, another collaboration with screenwriter Joe Eszterhas, this time tackling sexual harassment with a gender-reversed scenario. Michael played Tom Sanders, tech executive sexually harassed by his female boss, played by Demi Moore. The film was criticized for exploiting men's anxieties about women in power and for suggesting that false accusations were as common as genuine harassment. Yet it was commercially successful and sparked extensive debate about workplace dynamics and gender politics in the workplace. Throughout the mid-1990s, Michael continued choosing projects that explored masculinity in crisis. The American President in 1995, directed by Rob Reiner and written by Aaron Sorkin, showed a softer side as widowed President Andrew Shepard navigating romance while in office. The film was a commercial and critical success, showcasing Michael's romantic comedy skills and his ability to project both authority and vulnerability. It remains one of the most beloved political romantic comedies ever made, with Sorkin's rapid-fire dialogue perfectly suited to Michael's delivery. In 1997, Michael both starred in and produced The Game, a psychological thriller directed by David Fincher. Playing Nicholas Van Orton, a wealthy investment banker whose brother gives him participation in a mysterious game that begins to unravel his entire life, Michael delivered one of his most physically and emotionally demanding performances. The film required him to be in nearly every scene, often terrified, confused, and desperate. A far cry from the confident characters he had played earlier in his career. While the film received mixed reviews, it has since been re-evaluated as one of Fincher's most underrated works, with Michael's performance central to its success. A Perfect Murder in 1998 saw Michael playing against type as the villain, a controlling husband who plots to kill his wealthy wife for her inheritance. The film was a loose remake of Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder. And while it didn't achieve the original's classic status, Michael's cold, calculating performance demonstrated his range and willingness to play truly unsympathetic characters. As the 1990s closed, Michael Douglas had established himself as one of Hollywood's most consistent stars, an actor who could open films, generate controversy, spark cultural conversations, and deliver compelling performances across multiple genres. He had produced numerous successful films, won an Oscar, and created iconic characters that defined their eras. He was wealthy, powerful, and at the absolute peak of his profession. The invincibility that Michael Douglas had projected throughout his career, the confidence and vitality that made him a Hollywood leading man for decades, would face its most severe test in the summer of 2010. 4 months, Michael had been experiencing a persistent sore throat. A nagging discomfort that wouldn't go away no matter what remedies he tried. Initially, he dismissed it as nothing serious, perhaps stress-related or a minor infection that would clear up on its own. But as weeks turned into months and the pain intensified, he knew something was seriously wrong. What followed was a medical nightmare that would test not only his physical resilience but his psychological strength and his relationship with his family. Michael visited multiple doctors seeking answers for the increasingly debilitating symptoms. Some dismissed his concerns, others ran tests that came back inconclusive, and precious time slipped away while the real problem continued growing inside his body. The frustration of knowing something was wrong but being unable to get a definitive diagnosis is a special kind of torture. One that Michael would later describe as almost worse than the eventual diagnosis itself. Finally, a doctor in Montreal conducted a thorough examination and discovered what others had missed. Michael had stage 4 throat cancer, specifically on the base of his tongue. Stage 4 meant the cancer was advanced, aggressive, and had the potential to spread throughout his body. The diagnosis was devastating, not just because of the cancer itself, but because of what stage 4 typically meant in terms of survival rates. The doctors told him the prognosis was serious, that he would need to undergo intensive treatment immediately, and that there were no guarantees he would survive. The type of cancer Michael had was particularly brutal. Throat cancer, especially at the base of the tongue, is excruciatingly painful, affects basic human functions like eating, drinking, and speaking, and the treatments are almost as debilitating as the disease itself. Michael would have to undergo 8 weeks of intensive chemotherapy and radiation therapy, a combination approach designed to attack the cancer from multiple angles, but one that would ravage his body in the process. When Michael went public with his diagnosis in August 2010, the announcement sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. Here was Gordon Gekko, the powerful, virile leading man who had seduced audiences for decades, now facing his own mortality in the most public way possible. But Michael's decision to go public was deliberate and brave. He wanted to use his platform to raise awareness about throat cancer, to encourage people to get screened, and to show that even celebrities face the same terrifying medical battles as everyone else. The treatment was absolutely brutal. Chemotherapy pumped toxic chemicals through his body, killing cancer cells but also devastating his healthy cells in the process. He experienced extreme nausea, fatigue so overwhelming that getting out of bed felt impossible, and a weakness he had never known existed. The radiation therapy burned his throat, making it agonizing to swallow even water, let alone food. Michael lost a tremendous amount of weight, his face becoming gaunt and hollow, his body shrinking as he struggled to consume enough calories to survive. He couldn't eat solid food for months. Everything had to be consumed through a feeding tube, a humiliating and uncomfortable experience that robbed him of one of life's basic pleasures. His voice, that instrument he had used throughout his career to command screens and captivate audiences, became a raspy whisper. The pain was constant and overwhelming, requiring heavy pain medications that left him in a fog, unable to think clearly or function normally. Throughout this ordeal, Michael's wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, became his primary caregiver, support system, and lifeline. She had her own health struggles during this period, dealing with bipolar disorder and the stress of watching her husband fight for his life. Yet she remained by his side, helping him through the darkest moments. The experience tested their marriage in ways neither could have imagined, revealing both its strengths and its vulnerabilities. The psychological toll was perhaps even worse than the physical suffering. Michael had always been man in control, someone who made things happen, who produced films and commanded sets and lived life on his terms. Now he was helpless, dependent on others for basic care, watching his body waste away and facing the very real possibility that he might not survive. The fear was overwhelming. Not just fear of death, but fear of what his death would mean for his family, his children, and his legacy. After 8 grueling weeks of treatment, Michael underwent scans to determine whether the therapy had worked. The waiting period for results was agonizing, days that felt like years as he and his family held their breath, hoping for good news but preparing for the worst. When the results came back showing that the tumor had shrunk significantly and there was no evidence of spreading cancer, the relief was overwhelming, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. He would need continued monitoring, regular scans, and years of vigilance to ensure the cancer didn't return. The recovery process was long and difficult. Michael had to learn how to eat again,
gradually transitioning from the feeding tube to soft foods and eventually to normal meals. His voice slowly returned, though it was changed. Deeper and raspier than before. He had to rebuild the muscle mass he had lost, going through physical therapy and slowly regaining his strength. The experience left him physically scarred and psychologically transformed. Years later, in 2013, Michael revealed something that shocked many people. He clarified that his cancer had actually been caused by HPV, the human papillomavirus, contracted through oral sex. This revelation was groundbreaking because it brought attention to the connection between HPV and throat cancers, a link that wasn't widely understood at the time. HPV-related throat cancers were increasing dramatically, yet most people had no idea that a sexually transmitted virus could cause cancer in the mouth and throat. Michael's openness about this aspect of his illness was controversial and brave. It meant discussing intimate details of his sex life publicly, risking judgment and ridicule. But he did it anyway because he understood the importance of raising awareness. His disclosure helped destigmatize HPV-related cancers and encouraged more people, especially men, to get vaccinated against HPV and to understand the risks. The cancer battle changed Michael fundamentally. He became more philosophical about life, more aware of his mortality, and more determined to make the most of whatever time he had left. He spoke openly about how facing death gave him a new appreciation for simple pleasures, for family time, for sunrises and conversations, and all the small moments he had taken for granted during his decades of relentless ambition and work. Beyond the physical battle with cancer, Michael Douglas has endured profound personal losses and family tragedies that have shaped him in ways perhaps even more significant than his professional triumphs. The pain of watching loved ones suffer, of being unable to protect those closest to him, and of navigating the complicated dynamics of a fractured family has been a constant undercurrent throughout his life, providing depth and darkness that informed his most powerful performances. The most publicly painful and ongoing tragedy in Michael's life has been watching his son Cameron spiral into addiction and self-destruction. Cameron Douglas, born in 1978 from Michael's first marriage to Diane Luker, grew up with every advantage wealth could provide, but also with the crushing burden of being a Douglas in Hollywood. From early childhood, Cameron showed signs of struggling with the family legacy, with the expectations, and with finding his own identity separate from his famous father and even more famous grandfather. Cameron attempted to follow his father into acting, appearing in several films, including It Runs in the Family in 2003, where 3 generations of Douglas men acted together. Michael, his father Kirk, and Cameron all appeared on screen, a moment that should have been triumphant but was overshadowed by the obvious struggles Cameron was experiencing. Even then, those close to the family knew that Cameron was battling demons, experimenting with drugs, and showing signs of the addiction that would eventually consume his life. By his 20s, Cameron was deep into substance abuse, using and eventually dealing hard drugs including methamphetamine and heroin. Michael watched helplessly as his son made increasingly destructive choices despite interventions, rehab attempts, and desperate pleas from family members. The guilt Michael felt was overwhelming. He questioned his parenting, wondered if his absences during Cameron's childhood, absorbed in his own career and personal struggles, had contributed to his son's problems. He agonized over whether his fame and wealth had actually harmed Cameron rather than helped him, creating a young man who had everything materially but nothing solid to stand on psychologically. In 2009, Cameron was arrested at a New York hotel on charges of possessing methamphetamine with intent to distribute. The arrest was humiliating and heartbreaking for the entire family. Michael attended Cameron's court hearings, sometimes breaking down in tears as he watched his son face serious federal charges that could result in decades in prison. During the sentencing phase, Michael gave emotional testimony, pleading with the judge for leniency. Describing Cameron's struggles with addiction and taking responsibility as a father for not doing enough to save his son. Cameron was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, a devastating outcome, but one that Michael hoped might finally force his son to confront his addictions and get clean. However, the nightmare wasn't over. While incarcerated, Cameron continued using drugs and was caught with substances in prison, leading to additional charges and an extended sentence. The total sentence eventually reached nearly 10 years, meaning Cameron would spend most of his 30s behind bars. Michael's anguish over Cameron's imprisonment and continued struggles was profound. He spoke publicly about the pain of having a son in prison, about the shame and guilt he felt, and about his fears that Cameron might never recover even if he was eventually released. The situation strained Michael's marriage to Catherine. created tension within the broader family and forced Michael to confront uncomfortable truths about wealth, privilege, parenting, and the limits of what even the most powerful Hollywood figures can control. Beyond Cameron's struggles, Michael has also experienced the slow, painful process of watching his father Kirk Douglas age and decline. Kirk, who was born in 1916, lived to the extraordinary age of 103, passing away in February 2020. But the final decades of Kirk's life were marked by increasing physical limitations and the indignities of extreme old age. In 1996, Kirk suffered a severe stroke that left him with significant speech impairment, making it difficult for the man who had commanded audiences with his voice to communicate clearly. Michael watched his powerful, intimidating father become vulnerable and dependent, a role reversal that was both painful and oddly liberating. The stroke forced Kirk to slow down, to become less domineering, and in some ways, it allowed Michael and Kirk to finally develop a more authentic, emotionally honest relationship than they had maintained during the decades when Kirk was at the peak of his powers. Michael became more protective of his father, more involved in his care, and more willing to express the love and admiration he had always felt, but struggled to articulate when Kirk was the formidable Hollywood icon. Kirk's longevity meant that Michael had to prepare for his father's death multiple times, each health scare or hospitalization bringing the family together in anticipation of the end, only for Kirk to rally and continue living. This prolonged goodbye was emotionally exhausting, keeping Michael in a state of anticipatory grief for years. When Kirk finally passed at 103, the loss was enormous despite being expected. Michael lost not just his father, but the man who had defined so much of his identity, both as motivation and as the standard against which he measured himself. Michael's first marriage to Deandra Luker, which lasted from 1977 to 2000, ended in one of Hollywood's most expensive divorces. The split was acrimonious and painful, with Deandra receiving a settlement reportedly worth over $45 million plus ongoing payments. The divorce represented not just the end of a marriage, but the dissolution of the family structure that had existed during Cameron's childhood and formative years. Michael has acknowledged that the divorce likely contributed to Cameron's struggles, creating instability and emotional trauma during crucial developmental periods. His mother, Diana Dill, who had been such a stabilizing force during his childhood after his parents' divorce, passed away in 2015 at the age of 92. Diana had remarried and lived a quieter life away from Hollywood's spotlight, but she remained an important anchor for Michael throughout his life. Her death represented the loss of the parent who had provided unconditional love and acceptance, who had never demanded that he live up to impossible standards, and who had been his refuge during difficult times. Michael has also experienced the professional loss of dear friends and colleagues over the decades. The entertainment industry is brutal in its treatment of aging, and Michael watched as contemporaries died young from overdoses, accidents, and diseases, while others faded into obscurity or struggled with diminishing opportunities as they aged. Each loss reinforced his awareness of his own mortality and the fragility of success. The combination of Cameron's imprisonment and addiction, his father's decline and death, his mother's passing, and the dissolution of his first family created layers of grief and loss that Michael has had to process while maintaining his public persona and continuing his career. He has spoken about how these experiences gave him greater empathy, deeper emotional understanding, and a profound appreciation for the fragility of human connection. Today, at nearly 80 years old, Michael Douglas has entered a phase of life that combines reflection, continued professional activity, and a hard-won appreciation for the stability and peace he has achieved after decades of turmoil. The man who once embodied ruthless ambition and dangerous sexuality on screen has transformed into someone more contemplative, more grateful, and perhaps more comfortable in his own skin than at any previous point in his extraordinary life. Michael's marriage to Catherine Zeta-Jones, which began in 2000, has endured despite tremendous challenges that would have destroyed most relationships. The couple, who share a birthday exactly 25 years apart, weathered Michael's cancer battle, Catherine's struggles with bipolar disorder, a brief separation in 2013, and the constant pressures of maintaining two high-profile careers while raising their children, Dylan and Karis. The fact that they reconciled after their separation and have remained together speaks to a genuine commitment and partnership that goes beyond the superficial glamour of a Hollywood power couple. Catherine and Michael have found a rhythm that works for them, splitting time between their various properties including homes in New York, Bermuda, and Mallorca, Spain. The Mallorca estate, a spectacular property called Sestaca that Michael purchased in the 1990s, has become a particular sanctuary, offering privacy and beauty away from the relentless attention of American media. Here, Michael can simply be himself, enjoying the Mediterranean climate, spending time with family and living at a pace that would have been unimaginable during his driven younger years. His children with Catherine, Dylan, born in 2000, and Karis, born in 2003, are now young adults finding their own paths.
Michael has been determined to be more present for them than he was for Cameron.
Learning from his past mistakes and trying to provide stability, attention, and normalcy despite the inherent abnormality of being Hollywood royalty. Both children have shown interest in entertainment, with Karis pursuing modeling and acting, but Michael has been careful not to pressure them, encouraging whatever paths bring them fulfillment rather than demanding they continue the family legacy. The relationship with his son Cameron has shown signs of healing and hope. Cameron was released from prison in 2016 after serving 7 years, emerging physically healthy but psychologically scarred by the experience. Since his release, Cameron has worked on his sobriety, written a memoir about his struggles, married, and become a father himself. Michael has cautiously embraced this recovery, supporting Cameron while maintaining appropriate boundaries and acknowledging that addiction is a lifelong battle with no guarantees. Becoming a grandfather through Cameron has given Michael another opportunity for redemption and joy, allowing him to experience the pure pleasure of spending time with a child without the heavy responsibilities and pressures of parenting. Professionally, Michael has remained remarkably active and selective about his projects. He reprised his iconic role as Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps in 2010, directed again by Oliver Stone. The sequel allowed Michael to revisit the character that defined his career, showing an older Gekko emerging from prison and trying to reconnect with his daughter while the world he had epitomized collapsed around him during the 2008 financial crisis. Behind the Candelabra in 2013, directed by Steven Soderbergh for HBO, cast Michael as Liberace in what many consider one of his finest performances. Playing the flamboyant pianist in his final years, Michael fully committed to the character's mannerisms, sexuality, and emotional complexity. The performance earned him a Primetime Emmy Award and showed that even in his late 60s, he could completely transform himself and take risks that other actors his age avoided. The Marvel Cinematic Universe provided Michael with a new generation of fans when he joined as Dr. Hank Pym in Ant-Man in 2015. The role gave him the chance to be part of the biggest franchise in cinema history, while playing a character with depth and emotional complexity. As the original Ant-Man and a brilliant but troubled scientist, Michael brought gravitas to what could have been a thankless exposition role, making Hank Pym memorable and essential to the film's emotional cores. He reprised the role in Ant-Man and the Wasp in 2018 and appeared in subsequent Marvel projects. In 2018, Michael took on another challenging role in the Netflix series, The Kaminsky Method, created by Chuck Lorre. Playing Sandy Kaminsky, an aging acting coach in Los Angeles, dealing with the indignities of getting old in a youth-obsessed industry, Michael delivered some of his most emotionally honest and vulnerable work. The series tackled aging, mortality, friendship, illness and loss with humor and pathos. It ran for 3 seasons through 2021, earning Michael another Golden Globe Award. The role felt deeply personal, drawing on his own experiences with aging, facing mortality through cancer and navigating an industry that increasingly values youth over experience. Today, Michael continues to work, but at a pace that prioritizes quality of life over career advancement.
He no longer needs to prove anything to anyone,
having achieved virtually every accolade available to an actor and producer. He has an Oscar, multiple Golden Globes, an Emmy, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Film Institute, and a place in cinema history through characters that defined their eras. He has become more politically vocal in recent years, using his platform to advocate for causes he believes in, including nuclear disarmament, gun control, and environmental protection. His work as a United Nations messenger of peace has taken him around the world, leveraging his celebrity for humanitarian purposes. Michael has also embraced the role of Hollywood elder statesman, mentoring younger actors and filmmakers, speaking at industry events and reflecting publicly on his career with remarkable candor. He has acknowledged his mistakes, discussed his regrets and been honest about the costs of his success, including failed relationships, absent parenting during crucial years, and the toll that relentless ambition took on his health and personal life.
His perspective on fame and success has evolved considerably.
The man who once chased Oscars and box office records now talks about the importance of family dinners, quiet mornings with Catherine, watching sunsets in Mallorca, and the simple pleasure of good conversation with old friends. He has acknowledged that many of the things he once thought mattered enormously actually matter very little, while things he once took for granted, like health and genuine human connection, are what ultimately determine whether a life was well lived. The cancer remains in remission, though Michael must maintain regular checkups and lives with the knowledge that it could return at any time.
This reality has given him an urgency about making the most of every day.
while also paradoxically allowing him to relax and enjoy life more fully than when he thought he had unlimited time ahead. He has reconciled with his legacy as both Kirk Douglas's son and as Michael Douglas in his own right. The shadow of his father, which loomed so large for so many decades, no longer intimidates him.
Kirk's death in 2020 allowed Michael to step fully into his own identity to be the patriarch of the family, and to define what the Douglas name means for future generations.
Michael speaks frequently about gratitude, about feeling lucky to have survived cancer, to have a loving wife and healthy children, to have experienced the highest highs of professional success, and to still be working in an industry that often discards people the moment their appeal dims.
He knows he has been extraordinarily fortunate that talent alone doesn't explain his success, and that countless factors beyond his control contributed to the trajectory of his remarkable life. Looking forward, Michael has no intention of retiring completely.
He continues to read scripts, consider projects, and look for roles that excite him or stories that need telling. But he is equally content to spend months in Majorca, to travel with Catherine, to spend time with his children and grandchild, to simply exist without the constant pressure to achieve that drove him for so many decades. The Michael Douglas of today is a man who has lived multiple lifetimes within his nearly 80 years. He has been the privileged son escaping his father's shadow, the struggling actor fighting for respect, the producer who changed cinema, the sex symbol of the 80s and 90s, the embodiment of American masculinity in all its complexity. The cancer survivor who faced death and emerged transformed, the father learning from his failures, and now the elder statesman reflecting on an extraordinary journey filled with triumph, tragedy, and ultimate acceptance of who he truly is.